Thank you, Madam Speaker. We are here talking about the Minister of Finance's fall economic update, which is really just an update on how government spending is going in relation to the budget from some months earlier, this spring. Well, the bottom line, Madam Speaker, is that we are going further and further into debt. Inflation is at a 40-year high, and interest rates inevitably are going up to combat out-of-control inflation and spending. Now, the Liberals say, well, we had no choice. We are in a crisis. We had to avoid a financial crisis around the COVID-19 pandemic. But we have learned now from the Independent Parliamentary Budget Office that a large amount of that spending wasn't even COVID-related. This is the Liberal government, with the support of their NDP cousins, saying that we just want more government spending. We think that the government should be involved in a bigger piece of the economic pie. Down with free enterprise, up with big government. Well, our leader, member of Carleton who just spoke, has been warning for a long time that this type of reckless fiscal policy is going to lead us into trouble. And we're seeing that now, that there are real-world consequences. We're seeing signs that these pressures are on everyday Canadians. Almost half of Canadians are less than $200 away from not being able to pay their bills. 20%, 1 out of 5, are skipping meals. 1.5 million Canadians have used food banks within the last month. I received an email from a constituent, and I'm sure every member in this House receives these types of emails. But Corey wrote to me just recently, and he said, my wife and I have a high cost of living like everyone else. Without the cost of living increase, with the cost of living increase at an insane rate, we're not sure what to do. Here's what we have done. First, we've driven to the United States to get our child medication. Secondly, we've cut down on our spending, including buying less meat. We don't want to go to a food bank, as so we are eating cheaper food on a regular basis. And then he goes on to say, we have both, my wife and I have both started driving on our extra time with Uber Eats, but we find we are making less than minimum wage. So Corey sums up with this. I couldn't have said it better myself. Honestly, I don't know what to do from here. This is ridiculous, and the government has messed up our lives. And there are many, many Canadians that feel that way, Madam Speaker. When we're talking about the economic statement, we need to talk about the flip side of this government's happy-go-lucky spend, spend, spend attitude. The Bank of Canada driving up interest rates. That is the response. That is the consequence. That's the only tool they have available to react to this government's reckless fiscal policy. On the other hand, other than bondholders, no one is happy with high inflation. Let me tell you about a young family that reached out to my office just recently. They bought their dream house 2 years ago. They tied down their mortgage rate for 2 years. They've just recently received a letter from their bank saying that, unfortunately, interest rates are up. Their mortgage payments are going up $700 a month. That's $8,400 a year. They get nothing extra for that. They don't get a new car. They don't get a trip to Disneyland with their kids. All they get is more money going out of their hard-earned paychecks, going to people who are already wealthy, investors, people who can afford to lend out mortgage money. As a member of Parliament for Langley-Aldergrove, I speak to many small and medium-sized businesses in my communities, including a woman who runs a small retail business in the business district of Langley. She told me about what inflation is doing to make running her business much more difficult. She's talking about what interest rates are doing. She's paying more money on her operating line of credit with the bank right now. Profit margins are already very tight, and they're just becoming tighter. She thinks that maybe she's going to have to cut costs by laying off workers. Now, nobody's happy with that, except, of course, maybe the Bank of Canada Governor, Tiff Macklem, who is signaling that might have been a Freudian slip there, that in order to tackle inflation, we have to kill jobs. Now, I heard our leader, member of Carleton, ask earlier this week, is this the government's position that we want, do they agree with the Bank of Canada governor that we need to kill jobs in order to tackle inflation? Is that the government's position? I don't think we've heard an answer to that yet. Maybe we will get some comments on that. I want to mention a meeting that took place in Vancouver just recently with the ministers of health of the provinces and of the territories, where they met with our federal minister of health. Well, the meeting ended, it was a disaster, quite frankly. Everybody is pointing fingers at everybody else. It's everybody else's fault why this meeting fell apart. The provinces want more money for health care, no strings attached. And they say the federal minister of health just isn't listening. On the other hand, the Minister of Health is finally feeling the reality of scarce resources. And he says the provinces just don't understand his dilemma. On the one hand, he's having to work with his government's inflationary spending, and that is never enough for the provinces. And on the other hand, he knows that inflationary spending is driving up inflation and driving up interest rates. We are now at a position where the interest, just the interest cost to service the national debt, is going to be roughly equivalent to the amount of money that the federal government pays to provinces in health transfers. $1.3 trillion times the Bank of Canada's posted interest rate of 3.75%. If my math is correct, works out to roughly $40 billion. And the federal government pays $45 billion in health transfers. These are the pressures that we are facing. This is the result of this government's reckless inflationary spending. This is the legacy that this government is going to have to carry with them. So what will the Conservative Party do when we form government? And when I listen to my constituents, that day can't come early enough. We are going to, instead of, as our leader has said on many occasions, instead of creating more cash, we will create more of what cash buys. More homes, more food, more resources here at home. We will remove government gatekeepers and get more homes built and make Canada the quickest place in the world to get building permits. I was talking to marine operators in the Port of Vancouver, and they were telling me how long it takes to get an approval for any kind of a project. And one who also operates in the United States told us that within 18 months, of applying for the approval, they actually had shovels in the ground. Compare that to what happens in Vancouver and in Canada. No wonder our productivity is so low. Everything gets bogged down with government gatekeepers. We will make energy more affordable by approving projects more quickly. We will tackle climate change by making alternative energy cheaper, not by making Canadian energy more expensive. And we will reform tax and benefit systems to ensure that whenever anybody works, puts in some extra hours, it will pay for them. And this is the message that I want to give to Corey in my riding, that a Conservative government will ensure that hardworking Canadians will be able to keep more of their paycheck to feed their families. So, Madam Speaker, we will be voting against this fall economic statement because it did not respond to the demands that we put forward, which I believe that Canadians think are very reasonable. First of all, we had asked that there be no new taxes. This includes canceling all planned tax hikes, including the payroll tax increase that businesses in my community are fearing are going to make business even more difficult. And we are asking for no new spending, a dollar for dollar. If the government wants to spend an extra dollar, they need to find a dollar somewhere else. Pay as you go. This, I think, is completely reasonable. This is what Canadians are expecting the government to do, to manage their finances properly. Under this government, our economy is not being managed well. Thank you.
Questions and comments?